It takes roughly 0.25 seconds. That is the entire duration of a typical golf downswing. Just a quarter of a second.
Right.
Like, if you accidentally touch a hot stove, your brain's reflex to pull your hand away takes almost that exact same amount of time.
Which means, by the time your brain even registers that your hands are moving the club downward, the club head has already struck the ball.
Mm-hmm.
In the context of human movement, you literally do not have the time to consciously manipulate your muscles during the downswing. It's just a physical impossibility.
So you're basically completely at the mercy of physics, geometry, and whatever movement patterns you set into motion before you even reach the top.
Exactly.
Well, welcome to part 4 of our 10-part deep dive series exploring the science of golf biomechanics, kinematics, and ground reaction forces. Over the previous parts of this series, we looked at general movement and setup.
Yeah, and today we are bringing those foundational concepts together to really decode the exact sequence of power in the golf swing.
Right. Our mission today is to uncover the biological and, physical mechanisms behind that power. We're going to explain how the body actually moves to generate force, why elite players achieve such incredible mechanical efficiency, and how you can apply specific data-driven principles to improve your consistency and smash factor.
And to do this, we are synthesizing some of the best premium sports science literature available right now. We're pulling from Andrew Butler's OpenSim lower limb thesis, Phil Cheatham's kinematic sequence data, academic research from the International Journal of Golf Science, and elite coaching frameworks from the Titleist Performance Institute, Athletic Motion Golf, and Golf Smart Academy.
So before we get into the weeds of the numbers, I was looking at Andrew Butler's research regarding the physical stress on a golfer's joints, and the numbers he found are, frankly, terrifying.
Oh, they're massive.
Yeah. Like, we always talk about the golf swing in terms of distance, but we rarely talk about the sheer trauma it can inflict on the body. He found that during a swing, peak loading at the hip joint can be 3 times your body weight. And the lead knee, that takes up to 4 times your body weight.
Right. And to put those numbers into perspective, Butler used a biomechanical modeling process called inverse dynamics.
Inverse dynamics, okay.
Yeah, so instead of just looking at video, you actually measure the forces a golfer pushes into the ground, and then you use physics to calculate the invisible internal forces traveling backward up through the bones and joints.
Wow.
When you put a 4 times body weight load on a knee joint in a quarter of a second, the margins for error just evaporate. If your body is out of alignment, or if your sequence fires in the wrong order, those forces don't just magically disappear. They get absorbed by your ligaments and cartilage.
So figuring out this mechanical sequence isn't just a pursuit of, a longer drive. It is basically a requirement for surviving the sport without destroying your skeletal system.
Exactly. The human body is remarkably resilient when forces are aligned correctly, but it's incredibly fragile when they aren't. And understanding how to align those forces brings us to the real core engine of the swing.
Well, I want to introduce a visual here that helped me wrap my head around this energy transfer. Picture a bullwhip.
Okay, yeah.
If you want the very tip of a bullwhip to break the sound barrier and create that loud crack, you don't just grab the handle and shove it forward as aggressively as possible.
No, that would just awkwardly drag the leather through the air.
Right. To get that violent snap, you throw the handle forward and then you rapidly pull it back. The handle actually has to hit the brakes and reverse direction. That sudden stop causes the kinetic energy to surge down the leather and violently accelerate the tip.
The physics of that whip map perfectly to Phil Cheatham's research on the kinematic sequence. In sports science, the concept you were describing is called proximal-to-distal sequencing.
Proximal-to-distal.
Right. Energy originates in the center of the body, the heavier proximal segments, and transfers outward to the lighter distal segments.
From the handle of the whip out to the tip.
Exactly. And in a highly efficient golf swing, Cheatham's 3D motion capture data reveals a mandatory order of peak rotational speed. First, the pelvis reaches its maximum rotational velocity. Then the thorax, or upper body, reaches its peak. Next is the lead arm, and finally the club itself. But the true secret to this sequence lies in what you mentioned about the whip handle hitting the brakes.
Because if the pelvis just keeps spinning, the energy never moves up into the torso, right? It just stays trapped in the hip.
Precisely. The data shows that each body segment must peak slightly later and at a significantly higher speed than the segment before it. To achieve that, the preceding segment must decelerate rapidly.
So the pelvis fires, then actively brakes.
Yes, and that deceleration acts as a physical wall, forcing the kinetic energy to crash upward into the thorax, accelerating it. Then the thorax breaks, forcing the energy into the arms. Finally, the arms break, violently accelerating the club head into the ball.
But wait, when does that initial surge of energy actually begin? Because Cheatham's data highlights a phase called the transition, which creates something called the X factor stretch. And this happens before the backswing is even finished.
The biology behind the X factor stretch is just fascinating. While the club and the upper body are still completing their journey backward, the pelvis changes direction. It begins rotating forward toward the target. You are effectively twisting the human core in two opposite directions simultaneously.
Like winding up a massive biological rubber band.
Yeah, exactly. Physiologically, you are engaging the stretch-shorten cycle. Your muscles and the connective fascia possess elastic properties.
Right.
When you stretch them rapidly by rotating the pelvis one way and the thorax the other, neurological sensors called muscle spindles detect that rapid elongation. They trigger an automatic, powerful contraction to protect the muscle from tearing.
Oh, so it's a reflex.
Yes, that reflex creates a massive release of free elastic energy. You aren't muscling the club down, you're just letting the rubber band snap back.
Man, that concept completely changed how I look at the research from Scott Lynn and his team in the International Journal of Golf Science. They were investigating pelvic kinematics and how it correlates to smash factor.
Right, the efficiency metric.
Yeah, for anyone unfamiliar with the term, smash factor is a mathematical formula, basically ball speed divided by club head speed. It measures how efficiently you transfer the club's energy into the golf ball. A glancing blow yields a low smash factor. A perfectly compressed center face strike yields a high one.
And Lynn's team compared the 3D data of elite touring professionals against recreational amateurs.
Yeah.
They were looking for the specific pelvic movements that guaranteed a high smash factor.
Before I read their findings, I assumed the answer was obvious. I figured the pros just rotated their hips significantly faster than the amateurs. Like, I thought raw pelvic speed was the secret sauce.
It's what everyone thinks.
But the data completely debunked that.
It really did. Relying on raw rotational speed is a very common misconception. The researchers found that peak pelvic velocity was not the defining separator. In fact, some amateurs spun their hips incredibly fast, yet still struggled to compress the golf ball.
So what was the separator?
The true differentiators were pelvic acceleration, meaning how explosively the hips fired from a dead stop, and crucially, the precise timing of that peak speed.
See, the timing metric is what blew my mind.
Yeah.
The elite players reached their peak pelvic velocity exactly 102 milliseconds before impact.
That tenth of a second is the difference between a tour pro and a weekend warrior. Amateurs almost uniformly peaked far too late, often reaching maximum pelvic speed just as the club struck the ball.
But why is 102 milliseconds the magic number? What is physically happening in the body during that tiny fraction of time?
Well, think back to the kinetic wave traveling down the whip. Energy does not teleport. It requires time to move through physical mass.
Right.
When the pelvis hits its peak speed and begins to break, that kinetic wave still has a long journey. It has to travel up the spine into the thorax, cross the shoulder joint into the arms, travel down the shaft, and finally reach the club face.
And biomechanically, that journey takes roughly 102 milliseconds.
Exactly. If you peak too late, the club head strikes the ball before the massive wave of energy has actually reached it. You end up hitting the ball with just the power of your arms, while the energy from your lower body is still trapped in your torso.
Okay, that makes incredible sense. It is all about giving the wave time to propagate. But if this massive wave of force is crashing down the kinetic chain, what does a human being have to do physically to absorb it at the bottom? Because we are always taught to return to our setup posture at impact.
Which is terrible advice.
Right. If I try to stand in a static setup posture while a violent kinetic wave crashes through me, I feel like I would just fall over.
You would. And Golf Smart Academy's data on elite impact traits proves that impact is a fundamentally transformed position. At setup, your body is static and relaxed. At impact, you are managing extreme centripetal force that is trying to pull you forward, off your balance.
So what do the pros look like at the moment of truth?
When you analyze high-speed 3D footage, elite players arrive at impact with significantly more spine flexion than they had at address.
Spine flexion, so they're bent forward.
Yes, flexion means they are essentially performing a controlled athletic abdominal crunch. Furthermore, they exhibit pronounced right-side bend, meaning a right-handed golfer's trail shoulder is driven deep down toward their trail hip, and the vast majority of their pressure has shifted into the ground through their lead leg.
An athletic crunch with right-side bend. That structural shape must be the only way to physically create room for the arms to swing through.
it is.
Because if you don't maintain that space, you fall victim to the ultimate amateur swing killer, which is early extension.
Right? Early extension occurs when the pelvis thrusts forward, moving closer to the golf ball during the downswing, rather than staying back and rotating.
Golf Smart Academy uses an analogy that paints a really vivid picture of this. Imagine trying to throw a devastating knockout punch, but right as you swing your arm, someone pushes your hips forcefully forward into a brick wall.
Ouch.
Exactly. Your arm suddenly has no space to move. It gets jammed up against your own body. When your pelvis early extends toward the ball, you destroy the physical operating room your arms require to swing freely in front of your chest.
And to understand why early extension happens, we have to examine trail hip dissociation. When you watch tour professionals transition into the downswing, they appear to move into a subtle squat.
Yeah.
But when you watch amateurs, they often look like they're spinning out of control.
Structurally, what is causing the amateur to spin rather than squat?
The difference lies in the independence of the hip joint. Elite players possess the ability to disassociate their lower body segments. As they initiate the downswing, their belt buckle begins rotating aggressively toward the target. However, their trail knee remains relatively stable and pointed outward.
Ah, I see.
This opposing tension creates deep rotation inside the hip socket, heavily loading the glute muscle and storing immense power.
But the amateur connects those movements together.
The amateur treats the pelvis and the leg as a single block of wood. When their hips start to turn, the trail knee instantly caves inward along with it. The hip joint never loads. The pelvis simply spins, dragging the upper body along with it, which destroys the kinematic sequence and forces the body to panic and stand up just to avoid hitting the ground.
I feel like a lot of this amateur spinning can be blamed on old instruction. I remember reading endless magazines in the 1990s that commanded you to lock your trail leg perfectly straight on the backswing so you can, turn your hips.
Yeah, that old advice.
It always felt incredibly stiff and unnatural, but everyone preached it.
Well, the 3D data collected by Athletic Motion Golf decisively proves that locking the trail leg is a biomechanical disaster.
Wait, really?
Yes. When they mapped the joint angles of PGA Tour professionals, they found that, on average, elite players actually add about 6 degrees of flex to their trail knee by the time they reach the top of the backswing.
So they're bending it more, not straightening it. Why is maintaining that flex so critical?
It comes down to the next required movement, known as the knee switch. To clear the hips and generate power in the downswing, the lead knee must straighten and push firmly into the ground. Simultaneously, the trail knee must bend further and move outward to support the extreme right side bend we discussed earlier.
Okay, so they're trading flex.
Exactly. If you rigidly lock your trail leg straight during the backswing, you face an impossible physics problem. You cannot unlock it, bend it, rotate it, and drive it outward in the 0.25 seconds you have before impact. You have mathematically guaranteed a faulty sequence before the club even begins its descent.
Okay, I understand that we need to maintain flex and disassociate the hip, but I have to ask on behalf of every weekend golfer out there, if the data is this clear, why does the average human body naturally want to stand up, lock the leg, and thrust the pelvis forward? Why is it so hard to just stay in posture?
The Titleist Performance Institute offers a profound answer to that question, and it actually has nothing to do with golf. It has everything to do with modern human lifestyle and a concept called pelvic tilt.
Pelvic tilt.
Imagine your pelvis is a bucket filled with water. In a dynamic, athletic golf posture, you want to be able to tilt that bucket to pour a little water out of the front, which is anterior pelvic tilt, or pour water out of the back, which is posterior tilt. Elite players often move into posterior tilt as they swing to generate power and protect the lumbar spine.
But if you are sitting at a desk or commuting in a car while listening to this right now, your body is changing.
The sedentary lifestyle fundamentally alters human anatomy. Sitting for 8 hours a day physically shortens and tightens your hip flexor muscles, while simultaneously causing your glutes to become neurologically dormant.
Oh, wow.
This muscular imbalance forcefully locks the average adult pelvis into a permanent state of anterior tilt. Your bucket is perpetually stuck, pouring water out the front. You literally lose the physiological range of motion required to properly rotate your pelvis.
Because of your desk job.
Right. When you attempt a dynamic golf swing with a locked pelvis, the body seeks a compromise. You reverse your spine angle, and you early extend toward the ball because your shortened hip flexors will not allow you to maintain an athletic posture.
Man, your daily habits are physically pre-programming your golf swing to fail. That is deeply sobering.
It really is.
Since we know our desk jobs are actively fighting our swing geometry, and we know we only have a quarter of a second to manage these forces, how can you, as the listener, take these advanced 3D concepts and apply them practically at the driving range today?
Well, we have to bypass conscious thought and train the nervous system directly. Athletic Motion Golf provides an excellent transition drill that completely removes the anxiety of a full-speed swing.
I have tried this drill, and it is incredibly effective for feeling the correct sequence. You take your normal setup and swing the club back, but you stop completely when your lead arm is parallel to the ground. You just hold that static position.
Right.
Then you initiate a small pumping motion downward with your arms. As you pump, you deliberately focus on feeling your trail knee gain flex. You want the lower body to feel squishy and bouncy. After a couple of pumps, you transition smoothly into a shortened downswing, letting that trail knee bend, and you simply chip the ball out onto the grass.
By pausing the swing and isolating the transition phase, you are teaching your brain what trail hip dissociation actually feels like.
Yeah.
We're actively training the knee switch at a speed your nervous system can process. Over time, that feeling becomes an automated reflex.
We all carry smartphones now, and recording our swings is easier than ever. When you film your swing later today, what is the specific visual checkpoint you should look for to know if you are executing this correctly?
Scrub the video frame by frame and pause exactly at the transition that split second the club head changes direction. Look at the relationship between your belt buckle and your trail knee.
Okay.
If your belt buckle has started rotating toward the target, but your trail knee remains pointed outward over your foot, you have successfully disassociated the joint. You are loading the glute and storing power.
But what if it's wrong?
If, however, your trail knee and your belt buckle instantly cave inward together, you are spinning out and losing all that stored energy.
I see. And one final mechanical point before we summarize. Golf Smart Academy places a massive emphasis on wrist alignments at impact. We constantly hear about the need for a flat or slightly bowed-led wrist combined with a cupped trail wrist to properly compress the golf ball.
Yeah, everyone talks about the wrist.
But attempting to consciously force your hands into that position mid-swing feels impossible.
And it is impossible. The 3D data reveals that elite wrist alignments are entirely a result, not a cause. They are a downstream symptom of maintaining the physical space we discussed earlier.
So it happens on its own.
Exactly. If you maintain spine flexion, hold your right side bend, and keep your pelvis back, your trail elbow can easily pass in front of your rib cage. When the elbow leads, the wrists naturally and passively fall into that powerful compressed alignment. The hands are simply reacting to the geometry of the body.
Let's summarize the major biological and physical laws we've covered, because this has been a really dense journey through the kinetic chain. First, power is generated through a proximal-to-distal sequence. Segments must not only accelerate, they must violently decelerate to crack the whip and transfer energy outward.
Right.
Second, maximizing your smash factor isn't about spinning as fast as humanly possible. It relies on the acceleration and timing of the pelvis, peaking 102 milliseconds before impact to allow the kinetic wave to reach the club head.
Third, the moment of impact is a dynamic, high-force position characterized by an abdominal crunch, heavy right side bend, and pressure on the lead leg. It shares almost no similarities with your relaxed setup posture.
And finally, maintaining flex and deep disassociation in your trail hip is the only way to prevent early extension and maintain the physical operating room your arms require.
Very well said.
Every piece of data we've reviewed points back to creating and maintaining space, which perfectly sets up a final, somewhat provocative thought regarding how the subconscious brain handles all of this complex biomechanics data.
Yeah, this is a fun one.
We constantly obsess over fixing the dreaded flip, that moment when the hands release all their angles too early, adding loft and resulting in weak, inconsistent contact. Golfers spend their entire lives trying to invent drills to stop their hands from flipping.
The flip is incredibly frustrating, but viewing it as a hand problem is fundamentally flawed. Consider the sheer computing power of human spatial awareness. If your pelvis early extends toward the ball during the downswing, you instantly destroy the physical space required for your arms to swing.
Right.
Traveling at nearly 100 miles an hour, your brain calculates that geometry in a fraction of a second. It realizes that if it continues rotating the body, the club head is going to crash violently into the dirt a foot behind the golf ball.
So the brain knows a catastrophe is coming.
To save the shot and to prevent your wrists from absorbing a bone-shattering impact against the ground, your brain triggers a subconscious emergency override. It stalls your body rotation entirely and aggressively fires your hands to flip the club head forward, desperately trying to reach the back of the golf ball.
So the flip isn't the root disease.
The flip is your brain's brilliant split-second cure to the biomechanical geometry problem you created earlier in the kinetic chain. When you try to manually stop your hands from flipping without fixing your early extension, you are actively fighting your brain's self-preservation instincts.
That is amazing.
If you fix the space by keeping your pelvis back and maintaining your posture, your brain no longer perceives a threat. It will happily allow the hands to lead, and the flip will cure itself.
The flip is the cure, not the disease. Once you understand the biomechanics, the symptoms make perfect sense. If you found today's episode valuable, please subscribe to our channel. Every subscription helps us continue producing high-quality educational content for golfers and coaches worldwide. If you have a question, topic idea, or golf challenge you would like us to research, test, and explain, please leave a comment, contact us on LinkedIn, or send us an email. Don't forget to explore the eCoach 360-degree golf intelligence platform and experience our 48-hour free trial. You can also join our 30-day Golf Biomechanics, Kinematics, ground reaction forces, and Club Kinematic certification program to deepen your understanding of golf performance.